Death is not the end. Beginning of the new flesh. The new flesh. Birth.
Horror lifestyle.
Forgive me if I don't stay around to watch. I just can't cope with freaky stuff.
Welcome to the New Flesh Podcast, a podcast about horror movies and all things tangentially related to horror movies, horror franchises, and the horror lifestyle. My name is Brett Arnold at Brett Redacted on, I said it, I didn't mean to, on x.com. I'm Gene Parmesan on Letterboxd. I'm living a whole new life with a new identity over on Letterboxd, trying to get off of X, but I'm addicted to it. I love getting real-time news. I can't stop. It's like a slot machine for information. I'm just refreshing. And baby, it hits every time.
Yeah. It's apt because sometimes the information is simply not true.
Yeah, exactly. Jesse is here. Jesse Hassinger at Rock Marooned on the evil website and on the good website. I think he's Rock Marooned on all the websites.
Yes,
yeah.
I try to be. Yeah, you
can find him on what would be a funny one to say? Look up. Find Jesse on Second Life. And you guys can hang out.
That was a pull. Second Life.
It's the only funny thing I could think of in the moment. So
no, that's good.
There you go. We are here to do a new release double feature. Sorry we're a day late. I was in New Orleans. I was in the Big Easy for a wedding.
Were you solving a mystery? Did you catch the killer?
Yeah, we caught the killer. Everything's fine.
Cool.
Classic me traveling scenario in which the flight we were on there got canceled while we were sitting on it. And then on the way back, the flight was supposed to leave at noon. They delayed it till 5 p.m. the day before. So I knew it was going to be fucked up. And then it eventually got canceled. And we luckily knew that was going to happen and switched to a different...
You never left or got there, basically.
I mean, yes, but I had to basically just rebook everything on different airlines at great expense to get there. And I'm trying to fight the airlines now to get like some money back because, it's their fault. Like one of them was a mechanical error. And the second one, they said was weather related, but you don't cancel for weather 24 hours in advance. And also, I left from that airport and got to that place at the exact same time from another airline. So fuck you guys. I will be trying to claw back the money. But it was a great weekend despite the travel woes, which I always seem to fucking have.
I know, man. This is making me scared because I am going to... This is somewhat... I'll be able to report, I hope, something New Flesh related. I am going to Universal Studios in May to see the... I'm going to see the Dark Universe in person.
Oh, my God.
Yes. And I'm terrified now of both of that and also planes falling out of the sky, which I know, like, statistically, it's much more likely that I would get into a car crash than I would ever be on a plane that would go down.
I'm a person
but
who
boy,
always...
they aren't making it easy.
No, I know. That's happening. And also, I've always felt like the plane's going to go down. Like, I've always been that person who's, like, scared of that and just makes peace with it every time for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't love it, but you got to do it. And every time I end up in the place I want to be, it's great. So
yes, of course, the result is usually good, but boy, it's an imperfect way of
teleportation. Let's get on it.
Yeah, come on. Yeah,
there's no cautionary tales about anything like that. I don't think. The Fly is about.
No, especially not in the horror genre.
No, I think The Fly is about how teleportation is the future, and we'll get there.
Yes.
Even if we have some bumps along the way.
Yes, Elon Musk's The Fly. It all went perfectly. And that human fly guy is doing great.
He does kind of resemble like the opening scene Men in Black guy, Vincent D'Onofrio, alien bug, Edgar, water, sugar.
Yeah.
All right, we're here to talk about The Woman in the Yard, the Jean-Claude Serrat horror film that I should have known what I was getting into, and I didn't because I don't watch trailers, and I got myself real excited, and then the movie ended up being like what every horror movie is today, kind of. But Jesse's here with the I don't know if it's the contrarian take, but it is the take that's not mine. It is the take that is good. Jesse liked the movie. I did not like the movie. The movie did fine. You know, I feel like people were poo-pooing it at the box office because it didn't have awareness or it didn't screen for critics. But didn't it make it's almost back? It almost made its budget back already, I feel like.
Yeah, it made like almost 10 or something, which I think there was, I even read stuff early on, even not early on, but like earlier in the week, that they was kind of expected to do better, that it was actually going to do like 12 or something. And I was like, oh wow, that seems really good for this type of, now, no big stars.
Oh, yeah, I guess it did
location.
Just under 10. It did like 9.3.
Yeah.
After.
I mean, they'll probably won't lose a bunch of money, which is the idea. I feel like even a kind of flop horror movie kind of ends up just breaking even or maybe losing a little bit of money. So it'll probably end up doing okay. I don't know. I think the word of mouth will be bad. will be fairly poisonous, but I don't know. Maybe I can't tell what the difference between regular bad word of mouth and horror bad word of mouth is, because horror audiences seem to hate everything that they see. Broadly, although that's not my experience with actual horror people when you talk to them, right? Like I don't feel like when I talk to the folks on our Facebook group or other horror people that they're like, they're not the guys who are like, that sucked.
Oh no,
before.
I feel like we all want to love everything, and I feel like a lot of people do, and that's great. I totally agree.
Yeah. And then the general audience reaction is always like, horror movie C minus.
Yeah,
like, they're always like, they don't know what they're getting into somehow.
They're trying to outsmart it or something. I feel like there's a lot.
Yeah,
to
I think
that.
there is. I think Saw made people expect a twist at the end of every horror movie, and then there's, I think, a certain amount of horror fans, honestly, and not even not to sound condescending, but like regular horror watchers, like not necessarily the people who seek out horror podcasts and stuff like that, but just like your rank and file go to the horror movies, who are always just waiting for the Saw twist, and then when it doesn't happen, they like boo and get mad and leave. Because there were definitely people like waiting. There were people like definitely. I guess I'll talk about this more when we talk about the movie. But there were people like audibly misunderstanding the movie, The Woman in the Yard. That's where they were watching it when I saw it in Times Square. There was like a guy there being
Times
like,
Square,
yeah. He was like, oh, setting up the sequel, I guess, about something that was not doing
the complete opposite. In fact, I think. Yeah. That's pretty funny.
I was like, I don't agree with your interpretation. Guy who brought 2 kids under 13 with him to see The Woman in the Yard.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll talk about that when it's time to talk about it. But it is an interesting phenomenon. It makes it impossible to know which horror movies are going to collapse on the second weekend and which ones are going to turn out to be, audience hits or whatever.
Right. And like, I really misread Snow White. I was like, every Disney movie has the narrative of, or if it's bombing, it's like opening weekend was terrible, and then like it legs out fine. And I was
I thought this would leg out fine too.
We were wrong. Snow White is a bomb. It's a
true.
toxic bomb. It had a huge drop. We'll talk about that on the Patreon that we promised that hasn't happened yet. And we'll also throw A Working Man in there, the #1 movie in America, the blue collar, A Working Man.
That's right. I'll be sure to wear my working man sweatshirt that they sent me during the bonus episode.
Oh man, I thought you were gonna say like your construction vest or something.
Oh, they did. I don't mean like that. It was just because it was a Statham movie. They emailed me and they were like, "Can we send you a working man thing?" And I was like, "Sure."
Yeah.
And they asked for a sweatshirt size. Like, yeah, I like having hoodies all around the house.
Yes.
In every room. And they sent me a hoodie, but also a lunch pail, like a construction guy style lunch pail, branded with a working man, and a coffee mug that's so big that my wife is like, I can't use this. This is too large.
Like big gulp size.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like one of those. I feel like it's the dude version of those. One of those cups that
Stanley.
The Stanley cups. Exactly.
Yeah.
The dude version of that. It's like a massive gulp Stanley cup that I will never use, but is sitting on my counter right now.
Reminding you that Statham's at the top of the box office right now.
That's right. I'm so excited I didn't even like the movie that much, but I'm just excited that Statham is having this late career moment where now his movies go to #1 automatically. Very strange, but
yeah, I'm assuming it's all on the goodwill of The Beekeeper, because that shit rocked. And
well, but even that did well out of the gate,
right.
better than a lot of Statham movies. So I'm just like, what did the why didn't we just decide now that I was, Transporter 3, I was there with my little Jason Statham flag opening weekend, but I feel
Oh,
like
I
it
remember
didn't do that
seeing
well.
all three of those in theaters. Yeah, I was Statham head from the beginning. Happy for him as
Yeah.
well. So we're talking about The Woman in the Yard on this podcast, and we'll also talk about Death of a Unicorn, because I do think that movie does make a late pivot to genre, but
Yeah,
boy is it late. And that's kind of the whole problem with it for me, is that it's excruciating before that for me. I think you said you were fine with it until then, and I was like,
yeah, I
give
found
me
it
the
less
goods.
excruciating.
Yeah.
But
I wanted the goods, and they didn't really come. They came eventually, but I didn't really even care at that point because I was so I couldn't believe that it was just like this is a double feature, Jesse, where I couldn't believe what I was watching both times. In the case that Death of a Unicorn was unfolding, and I was like, really? It's an Eat the Rich movie? Like, I didn't watch the trailer. I didn't know that's what it was, and I was like disappointed right away. And then The Woman in the Yard I was watching, and I was like, it's really a metaphor for grief movie? That's all it is? So both of them disappointing like almost immediately on their faces, which like I think that's what they were working against for me, like right away, and that didn't help them.
right.
They kind of sank or swam in that moment, and they both sank. So we'll talk about both those movies. And before that, there's a lot of news. So do you want to just get right into it? Is there anything else?
Yeah, let's do the news.
Okay.
No, let's do it.
So Jesse, remember a year ago when The Strangers came out? The Strangers Chapter 1?
Vaguely, I do remember some kind of strangers
Yeah.
in the house.
There was much talk about Rennie Harlin's The Strangers trilogy and how Lionsgate was doing this bold thing of putting out The Strangers they had 3 movies. They made them all at the same time. The Strangers Chapter 1, 2, and 3. And they were the idea at the time was to put them all out in quick succession. Like right after 1 was done with its run, 2 would be out, and when 2 was done, 3 would be out. And I think the idea was they would all be out by the end of the year. And that quickly became a thing they just stopped talking about. And the movie they stopped talking about it entirely, in fact, until the other day when they just kind of unceremoniously were like, remembered they had The Strangers Chapter 2 to put out. And they said, oh yeah, September 26, 2025, which you might, real heads may know, that was the date for Saw 11. So Lionsgate took off Saw 11, which is so fucked up. We talked about it last week. And now it's been replaced with the Strangers Chapter 2. Just so funny that what's the deal with their treatment of this movie, in the sense that the only time they dated it is when they just happened to take something else off of a calendar. Like, it's weird.
I think they really did seem unsure about what the cadence of the
movie was a hit, and despite being critically maligned, it made almost 50 million worldwide, and it cost like
I could
nothing.
see they're kind of it's so funny because this doesn't seem related, but it is. There was like a CinemaCon stuff with Sony yesterday.
Yes,
and they were talking about those 4 Beatles movies they're gonna do, like some vast date in the future, and they were like, it's the first bingeable cinematic experience. Everyone's kind of making fun of that, although I'm kind of like, yeah, that actually sounds fun to me.
Well, as people who would go to 4 movies in a weekend anyway.
Right? Yeah,
we'll do that.
That's what, a day and a half.
But yeah,
that's not...
people. To be clear, they are saying
Regular
they're
people
going
don't
to
wanna
put out all 4 Beatles movies at the same time, is my understanding.
Yes,
which is kind of
or at least like within the same, maybe one a week, the way they were doing those Fear Street movies or something.
Crazy. Interesting.
Sounds fun to me. And they
yeah.
were like, the language they used was like, oh, this is the first bingeable at the cinema experience, which of course, there's been marathons.
Yeah, the Music Box of Horror Festival that I've attended is calling.
But like, I get what they're talking about. This is 4 new releases that are kind of go together. They're going to come out in cross proximity. And Lionsgate could have done that. They could have had the first, and they got cold feet. But I can see why they would, because even when something's a hit, you don't know. Wait, it's like, sometimes they've been like Matrix or Back to the Future, where like the third one coming out a mere 6 months after, even though that seems like now plenty of time to wait, it was like, I think there was a little bit of sense of like, was this not enough time for people to get excited if they were kind of disappointed in the second one or whatever? Like,
yeah,
what's too fast versus how long do you wait before people don't care?
I think they wanted people to forget how like disappointing it was, and like honestly, it worked, because I'm like, let's go, I'll watch this next one.
Watch it feels like a slog to have to watch 3 in 4 months, but like if you're just kind of putting out a normal sequel pace, or the horror sequel pace of like this would be fast for a regular sequel. I can see how it would be like, oh, that's fun, and then I would guess that they'll probably have to throw it out a little faster than a year and a half after, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe they just like having them locked and loaded, and maybe there's some balance sheet, advantage to being able to plug them into dates where Saw faltered, or maybe something else will falter, and they'll say, oh well, we'll just plug Strangers Part 3 in there. They should just always have a Strangers movie. I thought you would think that's what they would do with Saw. They would just have 10 of them banked.
Yes,
because you could just
and
make them
plug your calendar with
weeks.
it as you see fit, as you're like,
exactly.
You need the tax incentive, whatever it is, to hit the marks.
Right,
so
right.
Just throw one out. Yeah. Crazy.
But anyway,
yeah.
Strangers Part 2 coming in, so it's a downgrade from a Saw movie for sure, but
yeah,
we take what we can get.
The second, the follow up to the Strangers movie, which was like basically the remake of the Strangers, but they also teased lore to come, none of which I care about like the town or whatever. Like, that movie was quite bad, but I am looking forward to the next entry in the Rennie Harlan trilogy to see where they're going with it. The Strangers Prey at Night made 25 domestic, 31 worldwide. This chapter 1 made 35 domestic, 48 worldwide. So it did better. The original was a big hit, I think. It cost $9 and grossed 52 here and 82 total. So all profitable. And I think this one is even more profitable than the last. So they were right to bank on doing 3 of them, I think. And how much of it has to do with Lionsgate having that awful year last year where they didn't have any money because everything was... They were putting out a movie every week without any marketing, and they were losing money on it.
That's true. They might have wanted to treat Strangers a little more gently, knowing, oh, this might be a hit. We're not going to just dump it out there or whatever.
Interesting times going on. That's the Strangers. What else did Sony announce that's worth mentioning? The Spider-Man 4 is confirmed. Tom Holland. Is this the first time we've gotten to a Spider-Man 4?
Yes, it is. This is the first Spider-Man 4. May it go better than Captain America 4.
Yeah, I hope so. It's called Brand New Day, which is a reference to the comic book storyline from 2008 that takes place after a universe-altering event in which everyone forgets who Spider-Man was. That's what they tease at the end of the last movie. So they actually are following through on that. Do you think that's a fun idea?
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I don't know that. I don't know that comic storyline. I know what precipitated it in the comics is something very different and dumb. So
they kind of shoehorned it into what they were doing here, right?
Right.
Okay.
In the comics, it was Mephisto, who's the Marvel devil, makes a deal with Peter to save Aunt May's life if he goes to if he allowed to alter reality to so his marriage to Mary Jane never happened. It's so dumb. Just dumb comic book shit. So I don't think that's going to be the case here.
That comic books may be popular and cool now, but there's some dumb dorky shit.
And they're not even now. That's I say this as a comics reader, that it's so telling that even after the movies got wildly popular, the comics themselves people often take a pass on. Often for good reason, and I say that as someone who really likes comics. I mean, I think they're clearly going to go forward with this, the memory wipe thing at the end of No Way Home being kind of a regular thing. I do wonder how they fit. They're going to presumably want his MJ and Ned in the movie, and if they just are going to be supporting players, or if he's going to re-meet them or whatever. Anyway, I'm interested. I like Spider-Man. My kid likes Spider-Man, so it's fun to have a comic book movie I can take my kid to see, although she's going to be older by the time the cartoon
age out. Yeah. Oh God, the cartoon
by the time
date.
The cartoon comes out, she's going to be
Isn't the cartoon dated for 2027, which would make it 5 years in between? Is this true?
It'll be, I think, was it 23 or 24 or 22 or 23 that the second one came out? I don't remember, but yes, it's coming out in the third Spider-Verse cartoon is coming out. Yeah, so a 4-year gap. That's not enormous, but it's
normal,
more than
almost.
They were promising.
Exactly. It's more that they ended on the promise of a cliffhanger, and then weren't even ready to deal with it.
Yeah. Oh, did you guys want the other movie? Oh.
Yeah, we didn't make it yet or anything. We just are saying we have plans to.
Yeah.
So crazy. Anyway, also happened last week. The Final Destination Bloodlines trailer is out. I of course didn't watch it, but I already caught wind of there's historical context being added to Final Destination, I
Ooh.
believe. I think there's like the first time this happened type of thing going on in it, which is so interesting
Okay.
to me.
Flashback to the Civil War or something.
Yeah,
like that.
oh my God, can you imagine? I can't wait to see what kind of like musket Rube Goldberg situation we get going on. They're leaning into Tony Todd being like the last film of Tony Todd. I see his image everywhere, like the thumbnail for the trailer. Did you watch the trailer?
I didn't. I expected it to just be in front of the horror movies I
Yes.
saw last Thursday, and then it wasn't.
Well,
in
that's
front of either of
negligent
them.
on the theater's behalf. That's
It
stupid.
was very
Yeah.
negligent, and very negligent of them to show me the fucking trailer for The Amateur 2 more times for a grand total of 1,000 times.
I keep seeing people
I've seen
joke
it.
about this, but I have my movie screening privilege. I have not watched trailers in a movie theater in ages. And Woman in the Yard I did sit through, and then it's horror stuff, so I walk out.
Yeah.
But there's like a line from that trailer I see people on Twitter always saying.
There's like you can beat a 90-year-old lady in an arm wrestling match or something. Now I know the whole thing. You gotta if you're lucky, the jump. You can something about avoiding the blast with the jump or something. It's
I will be going to the screening, but I don't know anything about it.
They're sneaking it before. I might go on Saturday.
I saw that.
Sneaking it on Saturday night.
Yeah, I
but
saw that. That's so
know.
interesting. Yeah,
Who
go
knows?
see The Amateur
Anyway.
this Saturday,
Yes.
I believe. Final Destination Bloodlines. There you go. This is exciting. Linda Cardellini has been cast as Pamela Voorhees in the Friday the 13th prequel series Crystal Lake that still exists, that's going to Peacock, produced by A24, that at one point was a Fuller production, and the whole thing fell apart. We now know what that was going to be. You can read about it online. We talked about it here. It sounds like it was going to be awesome, but now it's completely different. Brad Caleb Kane is now the creator, writer, showrunner, and executive producer, but Cardellini's Pamela is believed to be a mother who had given up a singing career to raise a special needs child and takes a dark turn when she loses her son. That's a new twist. Was Pamela Voorhees supposed to be a singer in the other one?
She was always. That's if you watch it carefully.
Yeah,
she was always a singer. No,
she was always.
I just
it's on the cutting room floor, just her singing.
Yeah. It was always intended to be that way. They're just going back to the original intent. It's gonna be so. I'm really. This is a real provocation for me because was not expecting to be in a situation where I have a huge crush on Mrs. Voorhees. Yeah. I don't know if I want to live with
first
her.
Aunt May and now this.
Yeah, right.
What's going on?
I've liked Linda Cardellini since Freaks and Geeks. I love when she shows up in anything. She's wonderful. She's a good actress. She's very cute, and now she's going to be the mom of Jason.
Pretty cool.
So complicated feelings, but good for her.
Yeah, I'm happy for her. I hope she's getting paid. I hope the show is good. I'm famously like not a huge fan of that series. I think they're mostly more bad than good ones. I think they get fun in the later ones. Jesse and I should do that as a series, frankly. It's been a long time since.
Because I've only seen some of them, so I would be happy to watch.
Here we go, teasing things that we probably will never do. No, we'll do it. I'm down to do it. We like need to just to plan for something, so we should just maybe plan for that. I do have. Yeah. Not only do I have the Blu-ray box set for that, I also have 2 copies of it because I bought 2 copies when it came out, thinking it would be like this hot commodity to resell, not thinking that 4K was gonna be around the corner and everybody would want that version. But if anyone wants an unopened in the box copy of the Shout Factory Friday the 13th set with all the movies, including the remake, the limited edition lithograph is in there. That's why I kept it.
Wow.
So, maybe someone will hit me up about that. This is a helpful bit and piece here. Okay, moving on. Oh, the poster for I Know What You Did Last Summer is out. July 18th is when it's out from Sony Pictures. Freddie Prinze Jr. will reprise his role. Jennifer Love Hewitt will reprise her role. A bunch of new young people in it to get killed. The poster's just the hook. I'm in. Are you in?
Sure. I mean, I liked that first one when it came out. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
We all bought the soundtrack, I'm sure.
The Kula Shaker cover of Hush.
And
was like kind of
typo negative cover of Summer Breeze.
Wow.
Summer Breeze makes me feel fine. It's good. I unironically think it's good somehow. It's just a mood. The opening of that movie with that song and like the ocean. It's a fucking vibe.
I remember. Do you ever read the Ebert review of it? He like talks about how like the first shot in the movie is amazing.
Yes.
And then he's like, the rest of it is garbage.
Yeah,
but
well,
that first shot is
I
great.
think he's definitely right about that because my interest wanes pretty quickly after that. But
yeah.
that's so funny. That movie's coming out in July. It's pretty exciting. Another probably a Lego sequel. I'm imagining that's what it will be.
Yes,
we'll see.
seems like that.
Does seem like that. Chris Landon's out there promoting Drop, his new movie, and he's also saying, I think he pretty bluntly said, if you want Happy Death Day 3, go see Drop, which is so funny. Like, of course, yeah, okay, thank you. But he said he spoke with SFX magazine and was talking about a potential Happy Death Day 3. He said it almost took a very interesting turn in that, let's see what he said. I didn't write the script because I never want to count my chickens and get ahead of myself, but I was ready to go and start writing, but then it was sort of like, it was weird. We had lots of fits and spurts in terms of maybe we'll do it. At one point, they talked about it becoming a 3-part event thing for Peacock, which was weird. I was like, all right, whatever it takes. But then it went away, and that was the last we ever heard of it, which was years ago. It's been an interesting journey because both movies were financially very successful, so I think it's left us and a lot of fans scratching their heads as to why we weren't allowed to make a third, but I don't control the purse strings. I don't call those shots. It's entirely up to Blumhouse and Universal if they have an appetite or interest in us. He already revealed that the working title was Happy Death Day to Us and said it was different than the other films. Happy Death Day 2 made $64 million. The first one made 125. That's insane. I had no idea it was that big of a hit. So yeah, it's kind of crazy that they didn't just like make one for the fuck of it, because even if it makes a quarter of what the last one made, it'll be profitable for them. So
right, and then you can sell a box set and stuff, but maybe that's not as enticing anymore.
I mean, it is though. There's definitely I was shocked. A Vinegar Syndrome sale happened recently where it was like the keep went up, and there was. A crazy number of copies to start, maybe 100,000 or 70, like something like that. And they went in a fucking second. And I was like, oh, people are buying. I mean, that's still niche, but like,
yeah,
for $50 each, that's a quick buck.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think there's, those people are the ones who would buy the Happy Death Day box set from Shout, which is there's already Shout releases for those, aren't there? You have the 4Ks.
Actually, that's right. Yeah. I have the 4K of the first one. I think my wife got it for me on your recommendation.
Yes. I couldn't remember how that transpired, but I knew you had it. I do believe it is a boutique release. So
it is. It's like a much fancier one than you expect for a fairly recent movie, which is cool.
Shout does that sometimes. It's a Criterion, I guess, does it more and more too.
Yeah.
Anyway, Happy Death Day 3, almost a Peacock series. I'm assuming you feel the same way, that you're glad that didn't happen, because it opens the door.
Yeah, I would rather they did it as a. Yeah, I'd rather hold out for the movie. Although who knows if that.
Well, let's make Drop a hit, you guys, and
that's
we'll
right.
see.
If we all see Drop.
Did you get the invite to that finally? After getting the Brooklyn Horror Fest one, I'm assuming you did exactly what I did. And
Yep.
Classic. All right. Matthew Lillard in an interview or at a convention. Oh yeah, at a 90s con. He said, I can't talk about Scream 7, but I will say I can't say anything about it, obviously. But I am very excited and slightly terrified to be back, because all I can do is really screw up a legacy that we have. I could really suck, so that's my fear. My fear is that I come back and sort of punish something that I could never have touched and been just fine. I hope I don't fuck it up for everyone. That's funny and self-deprecating, and I'm sure everyone was like, boo, no, we love you.
It's also like, if this movie gets fucked up, it's certainly not going to be on poor Matthew Lillard.
Yeah, I think we're all going to be like, you tried. I think there was a teased image of like from the set of like a framed photo of Stu Macher. So I don't know what's going on there. We don't know. Everyone's back. So is everyone's back except the cast of the last movie. Mason Gooding and Jasmine Savoy Brown are, though. Anyway, Zach Kreger spoke to IGN, I believe, about what's going on with Resident Evil and why he's doing it, or like why it's going to be different. He said it's unlike any of the previous films. There's a moment that comes in almost every Resident Evil game where you find yourself in a dark passageway, your health is almost zero, and there's no way around. That's very true. That's why that game is so scary. It's all about like ammo resources and like, do I have enough for this battle? And that's why you die the most. So he's right about that. You have to go through, but there's something awful for you in the darkness. That is the thrill that the Resident Evil games have perfected. My movie will be built in the spirit of those games and follows one central protagonist from point A to point B as they descend deeper into hell. Sounds great. He sounds like he understands what makes the games good, and hopefully that makes a good movie. Video game movies are tough. Paul W.S. Anderson arguably did the most successful job with that franchise, so let's see what happens. September 18th, 2026 that's dated for, and that movie's going to shoot, I think, like very soon. And Jack Kreger's Weapons has officially been rated R for strong bloody violence and grisly images, language throughout, some sexual content, and drug use. New Line will release that movie in theaters this year, August 8th, 2025. What do we know about it, Jesse?
That it's like the Magnolia thing. Is that
that's
what
all we know? Yeah. It is I thought you were going to say the exact line. It's a multi and interrelated story horror epic that tonally is the vein of Magnolia. I think is the weird quote in Hollywood Reporter.
Quiz Kid Donnie Smith is back in Weapons. You heard it here first.
That's so funny. The trailer for Bring Her Back just dropped, like this morning. The full trailer. I saw like the standee is also up at the movie theaters for the new movie from the guys who did Talk to Me, starring Sally Hawkins. She didn't do. I'm assuming she said "fuck off" to Paddington so she could do an A24 horror movie.
That's right.
May 30th, it's out. A brother and sister uncover a terrifying ritual at the secluded home of their new foster mother. I'm excited for this movie. I think you were cooler on Talk to Me than I was, but still
interested to see the next thing. Yeah.
Good. John Carpenter again has said in an interview that like he doesn't have plans to make a make anything again, but I would love to direct again given the right circumstances. I'm not the same kid anymore who will do it for any amount of money. I can't back into a budget anymore. I'm too old. It's too hard. But directing is the love of my life. I'll never stop loving it. Same thing he said to Collider in 2019 where he said like nowadays they make these directors do movies for $2 million when they're written for 10, so you have to squeeze it in there, and I don't want to do that anymore. So if someone gives this man a budget, he'll make a movie. So fucking give this man a budget. Or maybe we should give the Russo brothers another $350 to make the Electric State 2 or whatever.
Yes.
Either of those will be fine with me.
Yeah, whatever.
There's a new Leprechaun movie coming out, or there was supposed to be one at Lionsgate with Felipe Vargas was supposed to reimagine the franchise. Turns out he's not on the movie anymore. He said it would have been a scary as hell and hilarious reinvention, but they didn't want it. So we'll see what happens there. But he has a new horror movie called Rosario, that same director, that's coming out May 2nd. But yeah, the Felipe Vargas directed Leprechaun movie for Lionsgate fell apart. A lot of things falling apart at Lionsgate these days. It's kind of sad because it really does seem like it's just like a financial situation. Anyway, Eli Roth has a new venture called the Horror Section that like is meant to distribute horror movies, and his first acquisition is the new Joe Begos movie, Jimmy and Stiggs. Did you catch that at the Brooklyn Festival?
I didn't actually.
Okay.
I was sort of interested because I've only seen the one of his I've seen. I really liked.
Yes, I remember.
I haven't seen the other. I haven't seen the other one.
You really liked Christmas Bloody Christmas, which we both agreed has that great Christmas light look to it. But we disagree on everything else about that movie because that movie was a tough sit for me. But Jimmy and Stiggs, I know that's screened at some festivals. It's out. They're bringing it to theaters August 15th. If you're into lo-fi horror, that's probably for you. Hell House LLC Lineage, the latest Hell House movie, the fifth and allegedly final, is getting a theatrical release for the first time. These were Shudder movies, and now there's a theatrical release coming for Hell House LLC Lineage. I believe it was announced at CinemaCon. Steve Cognotti, the guy who directed those, has a new horror movie on Shudder this weekend, actually, called 825 Forest Road. You may wonder why Jesse and I aren't talking about it. It's because it was pretty bad. I watched it. I thought it was pretty bad. I'll explain why on the bonus, but it's pretty funny the reason why it's bad. It's just like, really? It has like a reveal that's like an anti-reveal where it's like, yeah, I know. What do you mean? That's a reveal. Like that's of course that's what it is. Anyway, I still haven't seen the Hell House movies, but now that there's 5 and there's one in theaters, I better catch up because it sounds like it's getting a real release. Okay, we are here to talk about The Woman in the Yard, or as Jason Lee would say, that woman is back in the yard again.
That woman is back on the yard again. Love them. Oh man, it takes me back seeing that movie in the theaters.
Let's talk about Mallrats first a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be a Mallrats episode. The Women in the Yard from our man Call It Sarah, who recently made Carry On Netflix. One of their biggest movies. I saw in a chart showing that Electric State was not one of their biggest movies. It did not do nearly as well as Carry On, which I think is great because that's more the type of movie I feel like Netflix should be making is that kind of, B movie programmer. They can do that. They haven't usually, but anyway, he's back like what, 5 months, 4 months after his previous movie, with his first horror movie since either The Shallows or Orphan, depending on how you count.
Right. I think Shallows should count. It's a
Yeah,
suspense. I mean, it's a shark. What's scarier than a fucking shark?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, sharks are scary. That counts. Love The Shallows. You like The Shallows, right? I'm into
Yes.
that movie a lot. I love that movie.
Yes. We're far in the Shallows.
Far-
now.
Yeah, I'll Women in the Yard is a very simple movie. It's a single location movie where Daniel Deadweiler plays a lady who you quickly learn through context clues she's injured, has just been in a car accident that also killed her husband. She's the sole parent now for a pair of kids, one who's around 4 or 5, and the other is like a young teenager, maybe 14, something like that. Big age gap between those kids. It's like a decade between the two of them. And she is going about her day barely. She's like, the power's out and her phone's dead because
real emphasis on barely there, like barely surviving in this environment. Yeah.
Yes, and you think at first it's kind of an issue of her grief over losing her husband, and that is part of it. But there's sort of more to it, a little more to it than that. There's then finds a woman they live on a kind of a farmhouse property, and then about, I don't know what, 50 yards or something out from her house, there's a lady in like kind of dressed in black in a veil sitting on her own self-provided one-person bench, just sitting out there. And she goes out to ask her, kind of gingerly goes out to try to shoo her away, essentially, or ask her if she needs help or whatever. And the woman won't really answer her questions directly, and says, as you see you haven't seen the trailer, but she says it a lot. They repeat it a lot in the trailer, maybe more than in the movie. But in the trailer, you hear her go, "Today's the day." That's like a little sing-songy catchphrase. And so the rest of the movie basically stays in and around the house with a couple of flashbacks, as she and her children are increasingly kind of have their nerves frayed by this woman who does slowly, when they're not looking, get a little closer and a little closer, and then some other creepy things start to happen. So it's like, it's like 80, like without credits, it's like 85 minutes, something like that, maybe even less. And it is like, it's very much an exercise in a lot of ways. Like, it's a single location, basically. Even the flashbacks are often sort of woven into what's going on in the house.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
one that's
very
like really is
visually interesting. And like, it's Jean-Claude Serrat, so like, I feel like I knew single location, he's going to like go off with the camera in ways that are at least interesting. And I think he did like make, a single location thing expressive and interesting, which is like, I'm praising something. Look at that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that for me was a lot of what I really liked about this movie. I like this movie a lot. I was really drawn into it like immediately because of what Khaled Serra is doing with, I never know how to pronounce, how to emphasize his name. What he's doing with the camera in the movie, in terms of just, he like kind of fragments his image within the house, where you're often seeing, kind of Dutch angle close-ups of objects, or using the mirrors or window frames or curtains to sort of divide the frame, or using shallow focus.
And just the image of the woman in the yard herself is such a striking image. It's very good.
Yes. Oh, it looks like a painting.
Yes, especially as you say, like through the frames of the windows, and how he keeps doing it in different ways, and the way she moves forward and whatnot. It's well done visually.
Yeah, and that, to me, it was so well done visually. I was so taken with that aspect of it that really drew me into the movie. And I thought that the details you're given at first are effective and sort of doled out in a kind of an effective way. I know some people found it like, oh, nothing happens for an hour and then too much stuff happens. But I was pretty drawn into it, mostly because of how well he uses his camera and how well he's able to convey a mood. I mean, I think it's a real accomplishment that you can summon a real feeling of disorientation and dread in broad daylight for like 3/4 of this movie.
Yeah,
that's the other thing. Is like it's the morning. It's like a perfectly nice sunny day, and there's still something really unnerving and creepy about it. It's not like a big scare, like, oh man, I was just so rattled by it. But it kind of has, to me, an accumulating creepiness to it that really carried me through. When it starts to get a little more woo-woo in terms of like dream sequences and flashbacks that are sort of embedded within what we're seeing in the thing, and not really knowing the rules of what this woman's deal is, or even, how much of this is Daniel Deadweiler's character, in her head, and how much is her children seeing. It's very watery.
Well, that's
but
the metaphor collapse I always talk about, where it's like you want it to be a metaphor, but in the movie it's taken as literal, so it's like there's a disconnect there for sure.
Right. At some point you're making a pivot where you're kind of going, oh wait, but if this is a metaphor, then where did it come from?
Then yeah, why does your kid see the metaphor in the yard?
Right, exactly. And certainly there are many cases where I've seen that happen and felt like, oh yeah, this doesn't really work. For whatever reason, this one, it's enough in her head, not literally like, oh, it's all in her head, but like it's enough into her mental space and all that I bought into it pretty well, and kind of went with wait, what are people actually seeing? And, it didn't quite get me. It's interesting. I feel like, I don't know if we were talking about this on text, or if someone else was talking, I overheard someone talking about Smile 2, or no, it was you and I, because I listened to you and Mark talk about it. Yes. On Roger and Me. You guys were talking about, you mentioned Smile 2 as something where, for me, the fake outs that involve a person wandering off for 6 hours
oh god,
and going to a second location.
The leaps you take where like someone has to like, oh, you drove a car and like was like
while waiting for hours, and like found a location, and like there was never
you have to accept a lot for those movies to work. But I think when they do, it's fun, but you have to accept a lot.
Yeah, and it is, some of it is just kind of personal, whether it's sucking you in. With Smile, I really, when you realize that didn't, that as a fake out, I was kind of like, wait, but what? That makes no goddamn sense. And in this,
fair.
maybe because it's so confined anyway, when it started playing those games where you kind of go, wait, but were they privy to all of that? Was everyone in the movie privy to what just happened? Or was that whatever? I found that kind of more intriguing and more kind of unsettling, and kind of worked for me. Maybe because it's such a limited, like, to drive to Staten Island or whatever she does and Smile, as much as we all want to black out when we're doing that. She has to like interact with so many people and things on the way from A to B. Whereas in this, it's all in the house. So I'm sort of like, okay, if some of it's sort of this dreamscapey thing, and it does get a little bit woo-woo and sort of like, you're in the mirror world, and I'm like, what mirror?
When did that come into play? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a possibility to go. But so there were some moments. There are definitely some moments where I felt like it teeters on the edge of like, this is getting a little too up its own ass about some of this stuff. But for the most part, I was pretty locked into it and found it pretty effective. And when it makes that turn into kind of what the movie's really about, I found it very effective. And this is, eventually we'll have to get into spoilers.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to talk about it, because I teased on Roger Me. I can't talk about it, and I really want to.
Yeah. And our pal Louis Peitzman wrote a really good piece for Vulture that I thought was really interesting, but I also like completely disagree with almost everything he wrote about.
I haven't read it yet, but that piece was being written while we were talking, where he was talking to us about it, because he needed your perspective to like make sure that he wasn't going too far ahead of his skis. I feel
I do agree. I don't know if it's just because we were talking about it, that I totally do agree with his interpretation of of how he wrote out what the ending is, but how he feels about it, I just don't agree with it. And I found the movie, this is going to sound really kind of ridiculous to anyone who didn't like it. I think a lot of people won't. I even was fairly moved by it for passages of it, or I found it sort of kind of harrowing in a way that I was impressed. And like, what it's kind of trying to be about is, I agree, and Lewis goes into this in his piece, which I recommend everyone go to Vulture and check out, that it does flirt with bad taste, what it kind of eventually ends up being about, for sure. But I ultimately felt like the bad taste potential of it was, like, that's something you kind of have to kind of accept with a horror movie. Like, I kind of appreciate when a horror movie is willing to go into something that is in bad taste without it's not trying to be bad taste, like, but as you always put it, I always love this phrase, that doesn't offend you, school of bad taste. Yeah. This is really risking something in terms of like, it could seem insensitive or kind of too emotionally manipulative or laid bare. And again, I could totally see the version of this that would really put me off and really repulse me on that level. And for whatever reason, this one mostly did not, even though I was kind of like, ooh, we're getting to dicey territory here, movie. I mostly stayed with it, maybe because Deadweiler is so terrific in it, and she's such a like kind of immediate and believable actress. And she's not. I would say another thing, like would admit about the movie, she doesn't have a lot of. No one in this movie has like a lot of notes to play. Like it's not. They're not like the rangiest, most beautifully thought out characters. But in terms of playing those emotional notes, I think she and both the kids are very good. And I just maybe they were just so vivid to me that I was like, okay, I buy into this, I believe this, and I found it really interesting and kind of emotionally harrowing in a way that I wasn't expecting. I was expecting more of the orphan side of like the crazy freak out, you know, the like bonkers twists. You know, it's actually get out of the house. She has proportional dwarfism kind of twist, and it's not.
She's
that
a 33-year-old Ukrainian woman. Oh, okay.
Yeah, get out of the house now. She's Ukrainian. Yeah. You've seen what how they could fuck up a Russian. Like it's not that kind of bonkers kind of thing, or even the kind of, it's more like I would say akin to some of the more emotionally sincere Liam Neeson stuff, where there's such a heavy sense of guilt and burden, and that can be very overheated in the Neeson stuff in a way that's kind of fun and maybe even borderline silly, right? Like, you know, the stuff in Nonstop, which I love, but like it's very overheated. Where, you know, I'm not a good man, I'm not a good husband, but I'm not trying to hijack this plane. I'm trying to save, you know, that whole this isn't quite pitched at that emotional temperature, but I think it's closer to that than his other horror movies in terms of like House of Wax is like a silly, fun, like gruesome good time, and this one's not a good time. It's pretty sad. It's pretty sad stuff, but I found it effective. Like, I can see why someone would find it really not effective and really resist what it's doing.
Well,
which I think was the case with you.
Yeah, well, it's shot by Paweł Pogoreski, the Ari Aster cinematographer, who shot I think all of his movies, and who also shot Blue Beetle and both of Mimi Cave's movies, Fresh and Holland. Holland I haven't seen, but I hear is terrible.
Yeah, I haven't seen Holland yet.
Anyway, so that's like, I agree it looks good, and I can't wait to talk about the ending interpretation and stuff, because that's a lot. But yeah, I mean, at first a lot of this movie plays like Babadook, right? Like classic metaphor stuff, just metaphor stuff about a mother and her kids and not dealing with grief, etc., getting over grief. But then, as you say, the movie reveals itself to be like about a more specific strain of grief, I guess, or like not even grief. Like it ends up being about like the woman, I would say, is this is spoiler territory now.
Yes,
the woman is less a manifestation of grief than she is a physical manifestation of her suicidal ideation, and like the part of her brain that thinks these things, like the bad part of her brain that tells her to do bad things. It's that. Yeah.
It's depression, really.
It's depression.
But it's it's severe clinical depression.
Severe depression that like she's envisioning killing her kids and stuff. Like really bad stuff. So I feel like there's, you know, two reactions to that as a viewer. You go like, wow, this movie's like deeper than I thought and like more meaningful, and I am emotionally affected by it. Or this dumb jump scare horror movie just tried to like inject like really heavy stuff into it. And boy, can you tell, just because of the kerfluffle you and I and Lewis had over the ending. Like clearly they were testing this thing, and everyone walked away from it with a different interpretation of what happened. And or like maybe I think like the 6 out of 10 people had the interpretation Lewis had, which is bad in terms of like walking away from a movie feeling a certain type of way. You know what I mean? Like if the ending that Lewis thinks happened is what is intended, that is the most audience unfriendly shit I could possibly imagine a movie ending. And
well, it's interesting, not to speak for him, of course, but in Lewis's in his piece in Vulture, he described it more as I had interpreted it, which is not as, but I think, but in this with the same, like, still feeling negative about it because of what it hints at or wants you to be turning over in your head, which is the more severe ending, let's say, than my interpretation, which was more ambiguous. And I do think something that Lewis brings up in this piece is that the kind of weird optics of, like, you know, this and Never Let Go, which came out less than a year ago with Halle Berry, where it's like a black mother who's sort of harming her children through her mental illness.
Yes.
And I get that, although I like, again, this is might be a very naive white person thing, but I was like, I didn't know that was a stereotype, was that a stereotype or something? I just didn't think about it. I certainly noticed that, of course, that everyone in the movie is black, and then that's certainly part of the dynamic of the movie implicitly, even though they don't talk about it. But I didn't realize, I just didn't think of that in terms of like, trying to say something about black mothers or anything like that. If anything, I sort of read it as sort of, the kind of, I would think the stereotype is the black mother is the very, the person who's holding it together for everyone. I think they talk about, the rock of the family. I don't know if that is actually a thing or a stereotype or whatever.
Right.
But I think that to me the stereotype is not holding it together. It's kind of the opposite. The person who's like there for her kids and supports her kids no matter what, is etc. So to have the mother be a figure of like real menace in both of these movies, to me, it was kind of an interesting story. I mean, it's probably unfortunate that they come out so close together.
Yeah,
I thought that was an interesting idea. I don't think it was meant as, as some kind of.
And
weird,
if you go look at the script, The Woman in the Yard is based on it was a Blacklist script, and it was originally called The Man in the Yard, and there's a lot of differences, and I think it is like a race blind casting situation where it's like it wasn't written as it's a black woman with black kids or and it's like it's supposed to be. Go ahead.
Yeah, that can be a problem because then that means you're like it's even though the screenwriter didn't intend it,
taking on weight.
A white guy writing,
yes,
accidentally writing a black experience. But again, I'm a white dude, so it didn't. Obviously, I'm not the one to say whether or not it works in that level. But I wasn't thinking that much about it because I just thought Deadweiler was really good. So I was thinking, wow, she's like, I'm glad she got to. And that she wanted to do this made me think, okay, she must have really seen something in this character and in this performance. But I do think the area where it gets a little dicey for me is like when it sort of starts to conflate depression and suicidal ideation with these visions of her hurting her kids, because that, again, not to shame that or anything, it's more like those are kind of two different things, aren't they? Or like they can be, certainly. Like it's very possible for you to have suicide ideation without thinking about stabbing your child with that's where it started to feel like, okay, this is a little sensationalistic maybe in terms of where it also makes it more watery in terms of what she's doing.
Yeah, but it gives you a good jump scare moment in a horror movie where she stabs her baby or whatever. It's like, oh my god,
yeah. It does feel like that's what it's there for, is to give you the jump scare rather than, okay, but is that what she's suffering from, or is she suffering from clinical depression, which is relatively common and not something that automatically makes you think about killing your children or whatever. And that was a minor point, but yeah, what I found. That's what I found so interesting about the movie is that it's so keyed in. You kind of are led to believe, oh, she's suffering from the trauma of losing her husband. And then in one of those flashbacks where you see the argument they have in the car before they crash, there's a flash of the woman in black in her rearview mirror.
Yeah.
And that sort of keyed you into, oh, this was not, I mean, obviously she's, bereaved, but that was there before.
Not the source of her trauma.
Right. That it was something that was with her, and they have kind of a slightly, again, I would agree, slightly ham-handed argument in the flashback about her being unsatisfied and stuff like that. That's probably not the most delicate way of dealing with it, but I did that notion of like, well, it's always been there, and then the idea to me, like, that would really kind of genuinely creep me out in a good way, or in a, I thought, admirable way. The woman, that reveal of much later reveal of her saying today's the day, and that's what that means, is that today's the day. It's kind of flipping also the kind of like, you think, oh, she's like gathering, and then when you see her at the beginning of the movie, she's gathering her strength to barely get through the day and try to be a mom to her kids through all this, and that today's the day being flipped into like, today's the day you gather the strength to go through
to kill yourself. Yes.
And
like this movie goes as far as putting a gun in her mouth.
That was scary.
Like this movie.
It's explicit. It's very explicit about it there, and that the scene I found very moving is when she's, and then maybe this is manipulative, but her looking at the photos that in this kind of mirror world, photos of her kids aging without her, and sort of assuring herself they'll be okay, they'll be better without me.
Oh, it's really sad. It's really sad.
Yeah,
it's like, I wish the movie worked for me, because that moment, I totally get why you are having the reaction you had to this movie, because that's and then instead it feel like I don't know why it didn't hit for me. I think it's just because I got mad at it for being a metaphor movie right away. And then it just like was the metaphor movie. And then, or it was the metaphor movie, but it was also, as we said, that has the jump scares in it. So yeah, there's some insincerity to it, I guess, for me. But I don't know. The more I talk about it, the more I'm like, yeah, like I never hated it. I was always halfway there. I was like, it's 2.5. I still think it has craft.
The technique is so good.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
But
Go
the same
ahead.
way I could understand someone looking at it and going, I don't want to, this is not where I want, this is not the forum for dealing with, the idea of suicidal ideation and everything. Not that anything should be off limits for, but I could see someone saying, this is just like a cheap, 85-minute B movie and they're trying to like give it this heft. But for whatever reason, pack it with her and give it some heft.
Pack it with grief and give it some heft. Yes.
Yeah, there you go. That's perfect.
That's the horror genre right now. Yeah.
Yeah. But for whatever reason, I did kind of lock into it emotionally and did find it like effective as an exploration of that. When it gets to the ending, I will say, like, do I feel like it nails it? Like, not exactly, because you're kind of torn between doing the thing that seems like an easy out in one way and the thing that seems like an easy out in the other. So in some ways, maybe the ambiguity that I thought I saw in it, which I think I know lots of people understandably disagree, maybe that ambiguity was the only way I could square it, like, because I feel like either other option is kind of a cop out narratively. I don't mean for the person, just for the for this story. The only way to kind of do it to me,
because
and feel satisfied.
If Lewis's take is true, then like, what's the message of the movie? Like, give in and kill yourself because your kids will be better off. Like, is that why he's so like? Is that why people would be, if you were offended by it? Is that why?
Well, I think that is more that it's kind of using that as a sort of cheap, like, ooh, is it or isn't it kind of gotcha thing, more so than the messaging. But I would say, and I think what I found so interesting about the movie and so compelling about it is I do think, and I don't have any obviously firsthand experience of this, so I don't mean, but I'm not completely removed from some of the stuff the movie is talking about, and I think there is that mentality that I think, because you wonder as a parent when you hear when something like this happens, like, how could someone do that? Leave their kids.
Oh, like, it helps explain the justification for how a mother could commit suicide. I agree.
Right, yes. Right. And I think that is exactly the mentality a lot of people report talking about, is the feeling that, like, well, if I do this, it's really better. Like, it's better for them. They'll be much better off without me over the, kind of hanging over them. And the ending, I think, kind of tries to find a way to be true to that while not being the bleakest possible version or the kind of mega happy, it's all fixed now version. But maybe I could see how it's not the most satisfying part of the movie. It's kind of like a movie without a proper solution. We could talk about we've talked about most of what the movie is, right? So, like, she has a gun in her mouth, and it really seems like she is going to kill herself. She's kind of sent her children away at this point. And then she does hesitate. You don't hear a gunshot.
She sees her kid's stuffed animal, and it's like,
right. Her kid left her stuffed animal to say so she wouldn't be alone while she's dealing with whatever this threat this is. And it is very, again, if you're caring about the kind of mechanics of a lot of the stuff, the idea of, like, so is it the lady in black, the woman in black, a double of her? Is it possessing her? Is it a part? That stuff is all, again, kind of watery. But yeah, the idea is, like, the woman in black is kind of one with her now and is easing her into this, this act, committing this act.
I think part of why Lewis and me too, like, went with, like, the ending means what it does definitively is because the version where it's she merged with her and now she learned to live with her, like, it just feels, it's the most boring version, I guess. It's just like, I've seen that.
That feels very pat. And and that does seem to be what happens, where she does hesitate. You don't hear a gunshot. There's like a cut to the exterior where you're kind of primed to hear the gunshot off screen. It doesn't happen. And then her children come back with flashlights or whatever. And kind of, she's kind of has already put down the gun, and she comes out to see her children, and they kind of, there's sort of a sense like, okay, she's past that moment of, it's no longer today's the day for her. Like, the day's over. She's made it through, and she's with her kids, and they go back into the house. Where some details are, like, sort of slightly different in a way that is consistent with some of how the other parts of the movie kind of bleed the past into the present. Like, there's the really cool effect of her, like,
the car crash happening, and
Yeah, you see shattered glass kind of going across the screen while she's in the house. That's clearly it's clear what she's flashing back to, but you're not completely yanked out of that scene. Similarly, there's a sign that's kind of alluded to, naming their little house, that is alluded to earlier in the movie, that's now there in front of the house, and you're kind of like, oh, was that there before? You don't really know. And they're sort of led back into the house, which is now kind of more warmly lit, and the power's back on and all that. And you see her painting, because she had been a painter, the woman, the mother, and you see like the painting's different than a painting you've seen earlier in the movie. I'm pretty sure you see a painting of something like the woman in black, a kind of shrouded figure, and now you're seeing a kind of more complete painting that looks more like a self-portrait, but you see that it's signed with her name. Her name is Ramona, I'm just remembering now, with a backwards R, which had been a point of contention with her young daughter earlier in the movie, who had been refuting, like, not getting how to make your R's the right way.
Yeah.
But also, possibly indicating the sort of mirror world she was in, where she sort of goes into a kind of flashback mirror world where she sees her husband again and all this stuff, and that's where she's seeing the pictures on the wall of her kids, kind of indicating like maybe she did go through with it, and this is sort of her being taken by the woman in black into this sort of mirror world where she can be with her kids, but in this sort of unburdened way, but
in the you're dead way. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I found it ambiguous for a lot of reasons. One, that the painting was so much more kind of full and less kind of troubled to me. It seemed like a more full portrait of her. Two, that like the backwards R is like something that the kid was doing. It wasn't only something you saw in the mirror world. And three, that her husband wouldn't. I think the obvious cue would be to have her husband there. And then you're kind of like, okay, but if he's dead, of course.
Yeah.
So then if you're like, okay, if she's going to this kind of mirror world where she is free of her burdens of feeling of depression, but her kids are there, why wouldn't her husband also, like, why would her mirror world be the one just where she's beaten depression and not where, that's nitpicky, I suppose. You could, of course, have a happier world even after something like that happens.
Yeah.
I just felt like all that stuff sort of amounted enough to feeling like, and then I think they even have a voiceover that they repeat that the husband says earlier in the movie about I had a beautiful dream or something like that, where he had a dream that he had named their house and all
Iris
this, and
Haven
the work,
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they had done the work on the house that had finally been completed, because this is like this farmhouse that's like a fixer upper and all that. So I think they kind of leave it in a way. I think you're right that they kind of feels test screening-y, where they're like, well, let's make it very clear that she could have done it, but let's not have the shot ring out, because that's going to be a real bummer of an ending. But I took it more ambiguous in terms of whether is she living with depression, or is she has she given into it, and that's why she's able to live with it, or whatever. Yeah. And I thought that was sort of interesting. I do think it kind of, the ambiguous ending to me is, maybe I'm projecting it because it's the only way that I could find it satisfying, because I think either of the other endings, the straight, oh, she did do it, we're doing another reversal, you thought she didn't do it but she did, is unsatisfying and kind of mean. And well, now she's over her depression because she got through the day, is also a little pat.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So maybe I'm just projecting the only ending that I could possibly like to this movie.
You know how Topher Grace edited the Star Wars movies to his liking.
I do, yes.
I think this movie would be like just, easy to pin down with one easy change. I think you do the Topher Grace edit, you add a shotgun blast. That's all you do. You added a shotgun blast. Does that make the movie better or worse for you? I guess for you, you just said it would be worse because you don't.
That would be worse to me. Yeah, or like it just makes the end of it even more it makes it more treacly than anything else.
It makes me laugh really hard to think of like the test screening version where they're like, okay, well we have to test the version with a shotgun, and it's just like really cartoonish, like the camera pans and it's like completely.
There's absolutely there is a spot for it too, which makes it even weird. Yeah, there's like a pause where you're expecting to hear it, and it's very harrowing in the moment that you're waiting for a shotgun blast, and then it doesn't happen.
You've convinced me that I like this more than I thought I did. Honestly, because
my seductive
because I knew, I obviously got what it was doing and knew that it was doing all these things. And the funniest thing about the ending, I have to admit, is that I was walking out of the movie before the final shot, and I was texting, or Lewis had just texted me because he just got out of it, and he was like, "Can you believe how definitive? Like, or I can't believe they did that ending." And and in the moment, I had the completely different end. I hadn't seen the mirror yet.
The pushing
on the mirror. So I was like,
yeah.
"Oh no, I didn't." And he's like, "No, did you like stay?" He's like, "Stay a second or whatever." And it was like clear that like, oh no, he was right. This thing to me then clued it. Like I feel like maybe it was his. I'm just trying to understand. I did see it, and it did feel to me like it was saying she killed herself. But with your take, I do think there is some ambiguity to it that I didn't have before. I thought, especially with regard to the backwards R and the daughter doing that.
Yeah, and and like again, you could also read it as beyond what literally happens as just like a cowardly kind of ambiguity of like, we're not going to tell you, we're not really sure, because some of it does kind of feel like, well, yeah, more metaphorically, some of this is not fully worked out.
But if you're looking at it from the perspective of, as we said earlier, a movie that's trying to explain to you how a mom could get to the place of, it's better to kill myself than to raise these kids, which, like, as a parent, most people, if you're ever a parent, you definitely have thought about that and go like, how the fuck could someone do that? I don't understand.
Yeah,
this movie it does try to offer an explanation, and that scene is I did find that scene affecting, where it was like, look at the pictures of them through life with you not there, and how happy they are.
Yeah, and that's such an interesting flip on what you usually, those kind of things are usually used for. Usually it's like in this kind of regretful way, and she is obviously sad in the scene, but it's often used in a, I wish I could be with you. And in this, it's done to by the woman in black to the woman in the I keep calling her the woman in black. That's a whole other horror movie.
The woman in the black. Yard, she felt she was in the window, and she fell into the yard, and then
the sun went down, and she's the woman in black.
And then
she is the woman in black. She's wearing a shroud in the movie.
Yes.
I also thought separately, just like the effect of the shadows, her having the shadows extend.
Oh yeah, the wind chime moment, really cool.
Yeah,
the reveal of like I want to call it Buffy makeup on the woman in the yard towards the end when it becomes like monstrous. Like that made me laugh too. I was like, wow, they did they put makeup on this woman's face, which I appreciated.
Yeah. But yeah, I
like
think
a Buffy villain of the week. To be
clear. Like the vampire it does kind of look like the vampire makeup from the Buffy stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, to use those photos in a way where like that would usually be used as kind of a symbol of regret or sort of fight for your life. And here it's sort of being used to manipulate this woman, her mind, her mental illness, manipulating her and saying, no, it's okay. They won't be sad with it. They'll be great without you. And that kind of hit home for me. Again, not something I've experienced, but having, even kind of second or third hand knowing about some of those kind of cases, you're sort of like, oh, wow, that is, of course, that, no one does this out of like spite for their kids or thinking that they're going to really harm their kids. They would do it thinking like, this is such a problem. I'm more of a problem for them here than I am not here.
Yeah.
Which is, I found that's very rattling, but I think it's also very true to that mentality. Whether or not that belongs in a,
Blumhouse horror movie,
a Blumhouse 85 minute rather, chiller that could, story wise could easily be a Tales from the Crypt episode or something. I genuinely don't know, and I could understand someone blanching at that, as I think a lot of people did. But I, in the moment, found it effective and felt like it was at least getting at some form of truth about that condition, rather than using it as a kind of cheap. It comes close to being like a cheap use of it, but I felt like it stayed on the side of the line that I was okay with. But I could totally see someone seeing. I have no idea how someone with a closer experience of that or with less of experience of that would react to it if they would go, this is gross and exploitative. I'm sympathetic to that view, but I personally didn't feel that as much with this movie. I thought it was a very impressive piece of work for the most part. Not like a great horror movie, but definitely of a piece to me with Colin Sarah's other work, which I think is also the kind of elevated B movie.
I do feel that if I watched it again, I would get to the 3 out of 5 versus the 2.5 that I'm at now.
Or maybe, I also wonder if I had watched it, with this thinking feeling of like, oh God, this is going to be metaphor horror.
Yeah.
The trailer sort of like leads you there, but if I hadn't seen the trailer, maybe I would have been like, there would have been a much bigger sinking feeling. It
was just an instant like deflating of like, oh man, like this isn't going to be the Jean Colette craziness, as you said up top. Like, I wanted this to be like Orphan or House of Wax. I wanted it to be something crazier, and it was just something. It was just not what I was expecting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong
It's
with
not
it.
going to be one you're going to go to. Like, House of Wax would be a fun movie to throw on if you just feel like watching. And like this one.
Yeah, but you're right, man. There's merit to it, and talking about it made me realize that like I liked a lot more than I thought I did. I mean, I was always 2.5, but clearly the visuals work. I liked the shadow stuff. There's some interesting ideas in it, and yeah, I just do think it kind of whiffs on the ending. I wish it were. I just don't know. I don't know how you end it, and I think that's they also didn't know.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think they also didn't know exactly how you end. How do you get out of this?
Yeah,
you don't really. I mean, that's the actual condition is you don't. Like,
you don't.
Hope that you get some help and are able to push through, but like there's not a really.
We've seen that ending before, so like I was I was glad to see. Oh, she kills herself as an ending, just because it's like. Wow, they really went there, but then I'm left going like, fuck, what's the point? But then if we're talking about it, the point is to show you not to justify, but to help contextualize how a mother would do this. Sure, it kind of works, but again, as you say, a lot to ask for like someone going to see a horror movie on a Friday night, which explains why they treated it the way they did. So it all makes sense. We understand why they sent out the screening after the public screening time, which I've never seen happen before. I don't think, at least not for Universal. So I think we got there. Sadly, I do have to run. So Jesse and I will do a Death of a Unicorn bonus episode. Cameron's ready for her nap. So you and I can do that a little later tomorrow, and we'll get that up. But for now, here's the Woman in the Yard episode, and please rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And I am uploading the episodes to YouTube now, just in audio form, to tick a box. So if that's something that helps you, they're there. Okay, bye.
Death is not the end. Beginning of a new flesh.
Horror lifestyle.
Forgive me if I don't stay around to watch. I just can't cope with freaky stuff.